Hey guys, Andrew Dowling here, Mitch Kurtz, and thanks for joining us for another episode of the AltMed podcast. Make sure to hit like and subscribe to stay up to date with all that we have coming. All things AltMed? Yeah, that too. Okay. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the AltMed podcast. Your host here, Andrew Dowling. I've got my co-host on the line as always, Mitch Kurtz.
Howdy.
Mitch.
Yeah, well, thanks.
5 o'clock shadow, quite literally happening over there. And we've got a very special guest joining us today, someone we've been looking forward to speaking to for quite some time. It is Dr. Teresa Towpik, who is a doctor, a specialist medical cannabis doctor, and a co-founder at Medihuanna. Dr. Teresa, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here today. Thank you for inviting me.
It is our pleasure. We've got quite a few things to talk about. I know you've been busy contributing articles to Cannabis, and you've got your book. So that there's a few things that we'll be touching on throughout this discussion. But maybe we'll start with your background, what your practice was perhaps before you got into medical cannabis prescribing, and sort of how you've managed to find yourself there.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for the introduction and inviting me to speak today. So I graduated in Poland originally in 1984. And when I came to Australia, I had to go through the Australian Medical Council Association, and I became a doctor in Australia in 91, working in various hospitals, and then GP since 93. And throughout my professional life as a GP, I always used to practice very conventional evidence-based medicine. And so when I came across medicinal cannabis in January 2016, when I heard that it was going to be legalized for medicinal use, I was very, very surprised, because to me, as I said many times, I didn't even know what cannabis was. Sorry about it, but that's the fact. To me, it was just marijuana, and I was so ignorant and arrogant that I really didn't even know what THC was, or CBD, or God forbid, the endocannabinoid system. So my lack of knowledge, my arrogance and understanding was quite significant. I was basically afraid of marijuana as a teenager growing up in Poland. To me, it was the case, okay, these people started smoking, some of them, and very quickly became heroin addicts. So there was a bit of a fear, dogma, misunderstanding, complete misunderstanding associated with it.
And sorry, just to jump in straight off the bat, so Poland, when you were growing up there, it just was not culturally or socially acceptable to take cannabis even recreationally, is that?
Oh, absolutely. It was very at least in my experience, it was a big no. It was such a significant stigma that, you don't do this kind of thing. It's very bad. Your life would be ruined. You become heroin addict, and this is it, all over for you.
Yeah. No, well, and it's
very
it sounds like
there was no culture of smoking cannabis at all. People would
heroin cannabis usage equals heroin addicts. It's funny.
That's how it was.
Well, I mean, it's used in some cases as a tool for addiction, or removing addiction, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we're now finding more and more evidence that medicinal cannabis, especially the CBD part, is emerging as a very promising agent in the treatment of addiction, because CBD interacts with so many neurobiological systems in the human body that are responsible for acquisition and maintenance of drug addiction. So it is becoming very promising. We can even treat cannabis addiction with CBD and even THC as well.
Yeah. It's I've been hearing more. Obviously, we've done a couple of podcasts on a few different psychedelic therapies that deal with addiction, but cannabis is absolutely one. We see it for nicotine as well. Yeah, as you said, alcohol. It's I think we've already started. I feel like we've started halfway through this conversation at the start. But it's very interesting that now, do we know where Poland sits at the moment on cannabis? Are they moving towards legalization as well? I feel like that.
Look, that's right. I know that now cannabis products are available in Poland through the distribution for pharmacists, but what I understand is mostly CBD-based products. I don't believe they have a lot of access to THC, which, but I'm not exactly sure if I'm giving you right information. This is just my understanding of what is happening. I know it's easy to get CBD, but I'm not so sure about THC.
Yeah. So can you talk us through how exactly what it was like in that transition from going from a skeptic, let's say, to an advocate in a bit more detail? How did your journey really make that transition?
Okay, there's a bit of a story here. In January 2016, I went for a meditation retreat. And we were talking, actually, that was to do with psychedelics. And then, we're doing healing circle with certain psychedelics. And then there was the sharing. And one of the participants actually said, we were talking about plants as sacred plants, the teacher plants. And one of the participants said, I didn't really think much about cannabis at all at the time. That person said, you don't choose your plant. The plant will choose you when you are ready. And then I came home and my son said to me, that cannabis is going to be legalized for medicinal use. And I basically felt the shiver going down my spine. I really had this visceral reaction to this that, could it be my plant? Is it happening so quick? And then I felt very compelled to do my own research. I started going through various articles, PubMed articles, and so on. But my learning was very chaotic, just going from one article to another. And it was quite difficult because I was also very busy GP, working every day in the medical center, about 40 hours per week. So it was quite challenging and difficult. So I thought, but also what happened, I hope I am not too chaotic here. I started watching some stories on YouTube of patients who are actually using medicinal cannabis, and I was very, very surprised. It was like the curtain started opening. I realized that this amazing plant has been used by humanity for thousands of years, and it's not only medicinal, there are so many other usages, but this is such a sophisticated plant. And I also watched, the stories of children suffering from refractory and pediatric epilepsy. And somehow I also felt that connection. My heart started opening up, and I felt, if it makes any sense, but felt this kind of voice within me that I kind of even felt I have no choice, that I have to act.
Yeah.
I felt that sense of guidance from my inner self. I don't know how you call it. And it felt like it's impossible for me just to be a neutral bystander, conveniently waiting for others to start acting. And very quickly I became involved. And then in October 2016, we co-founded Medihuanna because I felt that what we were missing would be some easy to follow structured program that would introduce the doctor to basic scientific facts about medicinal cannabis, and then just be very practical for a busy GP to attend the workshop or do the online course that would then equip them with the necessary skills to prescribe medicinal cannabis confidently and judiciously in a proper clinical setup. I was, concerned that so many patients resort going to so-called black market, although, please don't take me wrong, I'm not really criticizing black market because there are so many very dedicated people in that space. But at the same time, I think sometimes people could be misdiagnosed, that they require proper clinical, medical assessment, monitoring, follow-up, and also seeing the whole patient, not only from the point of the symptom.
Well, it's really I just picking up first on one point you discussed. I actually remember around about the time that in sort of 2016, when Victoria was the first state to create the Access to Medicinal Cannabis Act, it was a time when I did see a lot of those YouTube videos circulating. You would see children who were suffering an epileptic fit, and the parents would drop CBD oil on their tongue, and the child would begin to calm and not be restless and emerge from what they were going through. And Yeah, it's been really difficult because we can't. It seems still like we're not even really, supposed to have regard to any of these videos, or not supposed to be talking about them. But I think, it's a little bit late for that now, because I think people can see that for some people, they are just hugely helpful. And you're definitely not the first doctor that we've heard that has described as a doctor feeling that overwhelming sense of duty to actually, to go out and to learn, if not to prescribe, just to at least better understand what is this medicine that we suddenly have the ability to prescribe that, required changes to the criminal law and other areas of law just to be able to be used as a medicine. I mean, it's been a heck of a journey, and one which I think I can confidently say we've still got many more chapters to come. So we're kind of in the middle of the story, or possibly even closer to the start. But let me ask you about, I suppose, just one thing that I came across in researching for this episode was your article released on Cannabis, where you talk about PBS and how a lot of people who are on medical cannabis, come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and medical cannabis, whilst it may be slightly more affordable than maybe it was, a few years ago, is still out of reach for some patients. What can you say? What do you say to that?
That's right. This is a problem because of so many patients that I have prescribed medicinal cannabis until I stopped when I was diagnosed with recurrent metastatic breast cancer. A majority of these patients, I noticed, are basically coming from low social and economic background. So this is a bit of a vicious cycle, because they have to rely on a huge polypharmacy. So quite often the number of drugs they take, I used to see patients taking anything 10 to 20 different drugs, and they're still not helping, not fully controlling their symptoms. Their functionality is affected. They quite often feel like a zombie. And then they come for a consultation because they hear that cannabis is legal for medicinal use, and they hear the stories of other people who are healing and functioning better, and their symptoms are better controlled. And then they find out about the price. So it's a bit of a shock. A lot of these patients are pensioners or age pensioners, or relying on health benefits and so on. So it is really quite difficult. But in spite of that, so many of these patients would say in the initial consultation, look, I can't afford it, but I am going to give it a go. And then we tried, and some of them, said to me, even though it's very, very expensive, but it changed my life so much that I can deny myself all the other things, but I'm going to find money for medicinal cannabis. And some people do that. However, unfortunately, there are some, for example, come from the black market situation. They've been smoking cannabis and so on. They come and see the doctor, and they realize that they actually feel better being guided by the doctor with a consistency of dosing and proper advice and monitoring. But then they say, okay, it's a few $100s per month. I simply can't afford it. And to me, it is very sad. I also believe very strongly that there are some substantial healthcare, cost saving can be made as well.
Absolutely.
If medicinal cannabis become on PBS, because we're spending so much money on, for example, chronic pain management. We're talking about billions of dollars. Also, so it's not only treatment costs, but it's time loss at work. So many of these people have to go on a disability pension and rely on Centrelink payments and so on. And we can see, first of all, we can reduce huge polypharmacy. So there's one saving to the government, because cannabis is such a multi-target drug and I've observed benefits on many levels, symptomatic relief. But so they can reduce their polypharmacy, opioids, benzos, and all the other things. So that's one thing. Also, by treating patients well in the community, unfortunately, I have to say, when it comes to modern medicine, we are very good at acute medicine, but when it comes to chronic disease management, I think we are failing. In spite of having so many drugs, the rate of cardiovascular diseases, cancer, and infectious diseases, antibiotic resistance is on the rise. So there is something we can do things better in a community. So better symptomatic control. We can reduce the number of unnecessary hospital admission. We may even reduce number of unnecessary surgical procedures, such as bypass or hip replacement and some other things. And as the patient become more functional, a lot of them are willing to go back to work. So I think that putting medicinal cannabis and plus all other medicines like psychedelics and so on, we know psilocybin is promising in the treatment of major depression. If we start looking into that, I think we can, have substantial cost saving, apart from the compassion part of just empowering people and treating them more efficiently in the community.
Absolutely. There's, and what you're describing really is, I think there's a clear structural flaw in the existing system. So we say that only approved or registered medicines can attract Commonwealth funding under the PBS. But, the problem there being that a lot of these drugs that are approved or registered can cause a lot of, bad side effects or have unintended consequences for patients. We, the taxpayer, we're paying for those medicines. Whereas, it really, if we've got a pie there that needs to be divided, I think we really need to think a little bit more carefully about where we make the cuts. And frankly, the issue of polypharmacy is a recurring theme with medicinal cannabis patients. And I just, it's a no-brainer for me, but unfortunately we would need to, if not dismantle the current system, we'd need to certainly reform it. So that just appears to be a step that someone will need to take in future. But how do you, in terms of your patients, do you see a lot of patients who are living with chronic disease, or like what's your
look? As I said before, I've stopped active clinical practice in February 2020 because of cancer. But when I was practicing, there's a lot of patients in this category. A lot of patients who are, polypharmacy is such a huge thing in a medical practice. And a majority of patients who approach me for medicinal cannabis would suffer from chronic debilitating pain, most of them. And they usually suffer from many comorbidities because, constant painful stimuli coming from the periphery and hitting the brain, of course, it affects the brain structure as well. So most of these people who have mental health comorbidities such as anxiety, depression, PTSD, drug addiction, also coming with metabolic syndrome. A lot of them will suffer from ischemic heart disease or high cholesterol or diabetes. So most of these patients were very complex and difficult to treat, and especially with chronic pain. And some of them would feel that the health system let them down. They just would go from doctor to doctor and not really finding a solution to their problem.
How do you find educating doctors on this? Like, I know obviously when you're a doctor and treating patients, there's a level of education getting them across a new medicine. So they're going from, taking traditional single compound medicines, lots of side effects, different things. There's obviously a learning curve, especially if you're prescribing flower, you're inhaling things, and you're trying to also break down this stigma that many patients might have had across the journey that might have been in your position back, 10 years ago. In terms of approach, what's harder? Is it harder to educate that patient and bring that away, or is it harder to educate doctors?
Look, it really has changed a lot. In the beginning, what I was observing, that there was more acceptance among general public, that patients were very interested and willing to come. So, for example, when I started prescribing, when it was possible, it was all word of mouth. So I would never initiate. I never used to initiate conversation about medicinal cannabis. People were seeking for me, just finding out that I'm, prescribing and I am supportive of that. Oops, sorry. I need to.
You're a working woman. We understand.
Sorry about it. I don't know why this person is calling. I was, I said that I'm having a podcast, but then what was I saying? That
Prescribing in terms of educating doctors versus educating patients.
Yeah. So in the beginning, we have more acceptance from general public, from patients. They're really quite embracing it, and interesting. The demographic, like a lot of the patients would be who are coming with senior patients in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Note, I'm not saying 60s senior patient because I am in my 60s. So no, 60s are not seniors. It's new 40.
Juniors.
So I would see lots of patients, but doctors in the beginning were very reluctant and I think a bit concerned, not sure what to do, because if you were programmed into thinking that this is a criminal drug, this is illegal and it's causing so much damage, how can you embrace this as a healing agent? But gradually, and I remember we started running a series of workshops, practical skills in prescribing medicine on cannabis since October 2018. Initially, it was a little bit difficult to find about 20 doctors to enroll, but now our workshops are very popular. We usually do roughly about 2 per month, sometimes 3, sometimes 1. And so far as I know, I think we train about close to 2,500 of doctors in Australia. And we're having some new initiative at Medihuanna, so we're running regular workshops, but we also introduced the community, the Medicinal Cannabis Forum, where doctors are actually reaching out to us and asking practical questions or any questions they might have. We're also now running a series of webinars with guest speakers. So we had one with ADHD, we had one even on the psilocybin and MDMA. So we can see, we are observing that the doctors who are enrolling in our workshop, they're really very interested. They are willing to learn. They see that this is important, that they need to respond to community needs. But the recurrent theme and difficulty is the loss on driving. There's always this question coming back. What do? We know that every part of the plant is important, but if you just want to use CBD, it's going to be very expensive because CBD is not as strong as product with THC. You may require higher volume and it may not be cost effective. And we also know that if you prescribe medicinal cannabis judiciously, responsibly, stick to microdosing, most of the time patients really are not impaired even taking a small amount of THC. So the loss of driving are very difficult to overcome. And unfortunately, clinical decisions are quite often based not on what really patient needs, but whether or not they can drive.
So it's interesting. Just thinking about that kind of stigma part. I mean, there's 2 arguments that come up a lot. Well, I guess from my side, when I think about it, doctors are prescribing opioids pretty frequently, which are also illicit substances. Doctors even provide or write scripts for, let's say, methamphetamine type products, which, that's a very recreational drug as well out in the public. So I don't understand why cannabis can't be viewed as the same, something that can be used to derive, let's say, recreational enjoyment, but and maybe misappropriated, if you will, in that way, if you want to be very specific, hard line about it, but at the same time be a beneficial agent. And the other argument that I hear a lot is that it's a gateway drug, which is such a weak argument in my opinion, because it's like saying you might do something else that is harmful as a result of doing something that's not really harmful, which to me is like, it's such a flimsy argument because it doesn't actually, there's no reason to label that as what it is, a drug of dependence, if your argument is that you might do actual drugs of dependence.
Addiction potential of cannabis is not, it can be addictive for some people. Some people may even develop cannabis use disorder. However, addiction potential of cannabis is not that strong. When you have on a rate of 1 to 3, from 1 to 3, heroin is most addictive, rated as 3, number 1, and medicinal cannabis is rated as 0.8. and it's sort of on that list. It goes as number 15. So it's less addictive than alcohol, benzos, opioids, even codeine, which is commonly prescribed for chronic pain.
Yeah.
So there is some potential for addiction, of course, but we are not talking about using huge amount of cannabis. We are talking about responsible, judicious medicine use when we stick to microdosing. And the idea is that we try to find the smallest possible dose that would offer maximum therapeutic, effect with no or minimal adverse effects. And also I can say that, look, I'm a medicinal cannabis patient myself, and I've been on medicinal cannabis since May 2019. And on a regular basis, I take so-called titration break. I stop cannabis for 2 or 3 days, and I have absolutely no problem with
but in terms of addiction profile, you're not. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're talking about how addictive it can be, it's not like, let's say, alcohol or opioids where you have actual withdrawal symptoms. Is that the case?
I don't have withdrawal symptoms, but also, if you don't mind, I can quickly share with you one of my slides that shows the graph. Are you okay with that?
Please do.
Would you like to see it? Okay, just one moment. I'll be very quick.
Yeah. We'll have to talk it through for those people that aren't actually watching the YouTube version of this, but that's all right. Definitely we'll do an outline of it.
Okay, I just quickly, if you can see it, I need to go to one of the slides, and I will share this with you about the addiction.
Yeah, 100%. I think I might be familiar with the table you're about to show us. Is that
from Robert Gable?
Yeah, where it sits on the XY axis.
That's right. Are you okay? You still want me to show this?
Please do. Yeah, no, that's a great example of the kind of dependence or addiction profile that cannabis has in relation to other drugs. I think the only one that's less from memory is it psilocybin?
Okay, so can you see my screen? Is it visible?
Yes. And
okay,
for those playing along at home, we've got, just a graph.
This is slightly different to the one that I was looking at, but yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about physical dependence. So here you've got heroin, which is rated number 1, and the addiction potential is, because on that line you've got harm score, and here is which number is taking, which rank. So heroin is number 1, rated as 3. Now, when you look at cannabis, it's number 15 and rated as about 0.8. And then we've got other things, for example, ketamine, amphetamines, codeine, buprenorphine, which is opioid, alcohol, tobacco, benzodiazepines, barbiturates, street methadone, offer much higher harm score and potential for addiction than cannabis. So that kind of gives you things into perspective.
It certainly does. I mean, yeah, it's interesting. Both, cannabis, MDMA, both sitting well and truly down the pecking order.
That's right. Yeah. And even it's not here, but I also know that for example, I know that's a different graph, sorry. But it's not here. Coffee is much more addictive than cannabis, because like I can stop cannabis and I don't really need to take it if it wasn't my medical condition, I really wouldn't be taking this at all. But for example, I can't start my morning without a coffee.
Imagine if coffee was Schedule 4.
Oh my God.
There'd be a few people. I've seen a few people here in Melbourne mainlining it. Absolutely.
Well, I would just visit an authorized barista or anyway.
Authorized barista. But, also talking about cannabis as gateway drug, the problem here is that in a way, it could be gateway, but not because of the botanical properties of the plant. We know that addiction score is quite low. It's because it's illegal to use for example, recreational use. So teenagers, young people may, and please understand me, but I'm not recommending that teenagers will be smoking. But humans experiment all the time. That's part of our human nature. So let's say that these young people may be going to illegal drug dealers. So they start mixing with the wrong crowd. And as they are mixing with the raw crowd, the drug dealer is not interested in giving them advice, or don't take it. The drug dealer would be more interested in giving them more. And they say, oh, how about you try this, you try that. And that in this way, not because how it interacts with human body, but because of social interaction, can become great for drug, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, totally. It's also worth reminding everybody that cannabis is actually legal in the ACT, and you could be you could be 18 or 19, and you could get it legally. You could grow it legally for yourself, technically. So to say that it's not legal and not in the hands of teenagers right now in Australia is recreationally, at least in some part, is actually untrue. So it's very much, we have a case study for it occurring right now. Not to mention the recent decriminalization that the ACT had on the rest of the drugs, including cocaine and I think even heroin. And I was reading about, and methamphetamine in small amounts, which is pretty radical for Australia, I would say.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, it is something definitely. I mean, we hear about this this study, and we heard it with one of the previous guests. There's this study. I'm trying to remember the exact study. You might be able to re-jog my memory on that it can be harmful for patients under 25 THC. There's I'm trying to remember that.
Okay, so this is the thing that we need to be. THC has this reputation of being, that's the psychotropic part of a cannabis plant, but it is also highly therapeutic as well. And it has bidirectional effect on mood. So due to individual genetic variability, for some people it may elevate anxiety, for some people may relieve anxiety, for some people can make it worse. And it depends on what is the genetic makeup, but also it depends on activation of cannabinoid receptors on the glutamatergic and GABAergic neurons. So activation of CB1 receptor of GABAergic neurons will inhibit GABA release on these presynaptic neurons, and that will result in anxiety causing high doses of THC. Then on the other neurons of glutamatergic, inhibition of glutamate will result in anxiolytic effects. So that's why we need to be very smart how we are using this molecule. Also, because another thing is to do with the deficiency in the endocannabinoid system. We know that we all have an endocannabinoid system, which is responsible for cellular regulation, homeostasis, internal communication, and so on. As we going through life, that system becomes deficient, and there's fear of endocannabinoid system deficiency. However, teenagers, young people, their endocannabinoid tone, most of the time, if they're healthy, is very good. So they don't really need any cannabis, because by doing that, they can start down-regulated the endocannabinoid system, and it may be very counterproductive. And plus, we still don't understand. Study shows that using cannabis on young developing brain may affect the cognition and may result in quite a few problems. So it's much better if teenagers don't use cannabis at all unless they have clinical condition. But when it comes to drugs, the choice whether or not to use drugs should come from the education, from wisdom, not the penalty or prohibition, because forbidden fruit usually tastes best. But if everyone is educated, including our kids, then they will start making their decision, not because they're afraid of the penalty, it's because they know what says for them or what doesn't. Does it sound a bit utopian?
Look, it's the sort of future that I want to live in. But I just wanted to dive into one topic, and I was going to ask if we could talk about your experience as a patient with medicinal cannabis. I know we've kind of touched on it briefly, or it's come up in our conversation, and I was going to ask you, Dr. Teresa, if it's okay for us to talk about that, but then I remembered that you've recently written a book about it, so I feel perhaps we can go there. But can you tell us about the book and a little bit about your journey?
Thank you for asking. So this book is called Cancer, My Greatest Teacher, and actually I started writing this book in October 2017. it was a sense of guidance, because my original diagnosis was in 2001, when I was diagnosed with a locally invasive breast cancer. So I underwent all the usual treatments, surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, reconstruction later on, and so on. But in 2017, when I woke up, and just in that stage between awake and asleep, like a question, like a voice in my head asked me, what cancer really meant for you? And the next voice was teacher. It was my greatest teacher. So I quickly went into computers, started writing the book. Within 6 weeks, the basic manuscript came out, but I didn't know what to do about it. So I got some advice. The person advised me to write the book about my life. So in that book, I'm basically writing not just from the book about cancer, the book about my life came out when I talk about many sort of negative experiences. And I'm showing that it doesn't matter how life treats you, you can always find the way to grow and transcend all your difficulties. So then I was just about to publish this book in May 2019 when I found out that cancer came back. And the way I found out, I have extremely severe pain in my left shoulder at night for a few days and nothing during the day. So that prompted me to have a bone scan. I just thought maybe this is going to be degenerative changes. So when I had a bone scan, it showed that actually I had, my left lung was full of cancer. I had multiple metastases in my bones. So because I believe in integrative approach, I went on conventional medication, but then I started feeling quite unwell with the conventional drugs. So I went on medicinal cannabis as well. Initially, it was very, very confusing for me because I was trying to do high doses of both chemotherapy as well as medicinal cannabis. And it was really very much trial and error. I was rather lonely in this situation. And for the first about 12 months, I was very unwell. I lost close to 30 kilo in weight. I became very mentally burned out. I was quite depressed. I had recurrent thoughts of suicide. It felt like life is really not worth living. But somehow, as I was going, I kept on going. I was meditating a lot and so on. I found the happy medium where I actually was able to reduce the conventional drug and reduce the cannabis. And my oncology is very happy. So we can say that by using cannabis, I can afford to use less chemotherapy. And somehow, it seems to be working for me. I'm going to 4th year, and lung changes have disappeared, which I was very happy about. I have a large tumor close to my heart, 3.7 centimeters, and they completely melted. I still have some metastases in my bones. And I right now, I feel like I got the happy medium when I found the right dose of medicinal cannabis and the conventional. But also, in my workshop, I always teach that cannabis is not a panacea for everything. You also need to use it in conjunction with other treatments. So I do a lot of meditation, diet, exercise, cold showers, swimming in the cold ocean, Wim Hof, breathing exercises. So I do quite a lot to enhance my life, not only just to heal cancer, but also have better quality of life. And my attitude now is with cancer that regardless of how many years or months or days, whatever I've got, live each day with as much joy as you can, if it makes sense. But to me, what happened now at this stage of my life, that to me, I measure my success by how much joy I have, not by how money I have, how much money I have in the bank, or how much approval I'm getting, or people like me or not like me. It's how it feels within me.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I have to say what you described with, years later, coming across the situation and going in for the scan, that must have been a very scary time, but how amazing you look, glowing, healthy. You clearly come through with quite an impressive recovery. And I love that. I actually have a mate who he unfortunately had a type of cancer that has actually a very strong survival rate. So he's fine, but he had this when he was quite in his early 20s. And he said that the one thing that cancer does is it just once you have a brush with mortality, you just have a complete new lease on life. And it sounds like, were you doing any of the Wim Hof exercises before
Oh
cancer?
yeah, every day, every day. And
Oh,
I
every
jump
day
into,
now.
oh, cold shower, it's killing me, but it feels so good after. And because, look, I know it sounds paradoxical. Cancer kind of woke me up in a way. It's a bit of an awakening. Who I am as a human being, what my life is all about. Is it just about accumulation of material things, or are there more important things? Almost, I do love money, material things. Why not? You know, it gives you opportunities. Like I went to South America this year. I traveled for 2 months. I did Inca Trail. And beautiful. Walking with cancer, and while walking with Inca Trail with my fiance, we both got COVID as well. But you know, you just put it out to experience. You keep on going. You keep on going until your last breath. That's how it is. So the paradox is that somehow I have a certain, although I would prefer not to have cancer, but there's also a sense of gratitude that it guided me to this kind of inner experiences, which otherwise I wouldn't experience without it. So it made my life much, much deeper. But I'm talking about inner life, not necessarily you know, that kind of life superficial.
No, absolutely. It's do you find though, because you're not the first person that I've heard recently talk about these holistic integrated approaches to health and incorporating a cold shower every morning. It sounds like it would be more effective than a coffee, but you know, waking
I have both.
Yeah, you have both. Okay. Do you have the coffee in the cold shower or afterwards? Like
afterwards?
Okay. It's it just sounds, I mean, I just don't think I could do it. Well, I could do it, but it sounds deeply uncomfortable.
You don't think about it, you just jump in and that's it.
How long do you have to stay in there?
Look, I only do about 2 or 3 minutes.
2 or 3 minutes? Yeah. And is there any, are we talking like completely cold?
Completely cold. Yeah, completely cold. I just jump in. Initially it was just warm and then turning to the only thing, I can't shampoo my hair with completely cold shower. So that when I shampoo a little bit lukewarm. But yeah, I just jump into cold shower straight away. I scream and shout. I do a bit of breathing, fast breathing. Oh, I try to imagine that it's amazing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the power of positive psychology. But you're based up in Sydney, I see. So yes. I mean, being in Melbourne, surely we would be allowed to have a little bit of warm water. I mean, it's very cold down here, particularly during winter.
That's right. Yeah. I also swim I've been swimming in the ocean since July.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's so cold that it's hot.
Yeah. No, we have special wetsuits in Victoria for that kind of thing. I've got one. It's very thick and it's, you know, you can go in winter, but yeah, I can't imagine doing that in just a humble pair of board shorts or something. But this is all very, very adventurous. I think, Mitch, you and I need to improve our health, or at least have a shot at doing cold showers in the morning. Maybe that's put that on the agenda for an AltMed experiment in 2023.
Why not? You know, it's only a few minutes. Just don't think about it. Jump in, you know, and the scream and shout. It's so good. It wakes you up.
I'm trying to think of a bunch of jokes, but to be honest, no. I'll just wait. I'll do that once Cannabis is on the PBS, and I'm depending on you, Teresa, to get us there.
Well, how about, let's keep on, I don't like the word fighting. Let's keep on lobbying, you know, convincing and talking about it. And I think that's why I put the monetary part in this article, because unfortunately money talks, and bureaucrats will only, you know, look into things if they see the potential financial benefit. Unfortunately, that's how.
Surely the sector has to be generating enough tax, you know, very soon to be able to substantiate being looked at. You know what I mean? Oh, well, I mean, I know that medicines are exempt from GST, but at least the money being, well, was going to say the money being made by some of these companies, but a lot of them are operating in some serious debt.
I know it's not easy. It's not easy, I believe. But also, look, cannabis has so many other usages, like hemp to grow for fiber, for clothing, for building materials, and so on. I think we could allow farmers to diversify, their crops, not rely on certain things. Cannabis is also very good for environment, and it's, hemp. It's easy to grow, and it can be grown. I know where there's metal where I am from in Poland, there is copper works, and there was a lot of pollution in the 70s and 80s. They've done something about it now. But another thing, they used to grow a lot of cannabis ruderalis around the metal works because it was so good for the soil, to purify the soil. So there's so many other beneficial things when it comes to cannabis, not only just the medicine, but also so many other usages that could really, really enhance our economy, allow us to diversify. And also another comment that I want to make, that cannabis to me is also sort of reflection of attitude in the society. As the synthetic single molecule medicine were introduced not so long ago, beginning of 20th century, and they work, one medicine for this, one medicine for that. But I think as a society, we're kind of craving going back to nature. We want to work with nature. We want to be healed with nature. And, all of these herbs really offer so much healing.
I completely agree with you, Dr. Teresa. And I think that the recency of that change to synthetic single molecule medicine, maybe called by others, or referred to, goes by other names, Western medicine, however you wish to think of it. But it's worth people understanding that all of the, regulatory frameworks and the systems with which we access medicines, we're now, as we renew our focus and look at natural and plant-based alternative medicines, we're asking those medicines to be dealt with under the systems that were designed for different types of drugs. So it really has, I think, put us in a position where we need to do something to at least accommodate these medicines. And I think under the current system, at least in Australia, that does need to be reformed. It's bad for doctors, it's bad for patients. I think it's actually bad for the regulator as well. So I think that there is just a kind of consensus view that what we have is not fit for purpose. So I would really like to see that changed.
And also, the point is that we have created a disease system, because we look at the patient from the point of symptom, chronic pain, heart disease. But when it comes, it's only we dissect a human being, put labels, because our rational mind operates that way. For us to understand, we need to dissect things. So we created more of a disease-oriented system, pharmaceutical systems, when you have single molecule agents just to work on that particular symptoms. Whereas when it comes to plants, for example, cannabis, there's hundreds of different components. You've got major cannabinoids, THC, CBD, minor cannabinoids, therapies, and flavonoids, and all of them have important immunomodulatory and therapeutic properties. And according to entourage effect, one single molecule is not as effective as the whole working together. So I think this is going to be, in my opinion, a bit sort of slow and stepwise, I would say, change, when we need to also change our attitude as doctors and as a humanity, as a general public as well, that we need to focus more on prevention, on creating the situation that we actually can prevent the disease. So apart from cannabis, and when it happens, we use herbs, but also diet, exercise, regular meditation, the way you think, how you're dealing with your negative automatic thoughts, and this kind of thing. I also am very into mind and body connection, people like Joe Dispenza, Wayne Dyer, and so on, where they are talking about healing through the power of your mind, of your spirit, and so on. And we need to embrace it. We're having very materialistic worldview. I don't want to sound like a sort of religious person, but that worldview is based on the Newtonian way of thinking of cause and effect and predictability, which is quite mechanical system. And when you look into quantum physics, I'm not the expert here at all, but in quantum physics, everything is very different. It doesn't mean that if you do this, that happens. And the randomized clinical trials are very much based on trying to eliminate a part of us that is transcendental, invisible, and so on. We try to make it as objective as possible. But in doing that, we're losing the part that is most responsible for healing, the spiritual, the transcendental, the invisible part.
Yeah, it's
it makes any sense. Well, I'm just sharing my
no, I agree. It's a very and we have held the randomized control double blind, that is the gold standard, but often at the expense of, some doctors won't consider any other kind of evidence, and they won't consider anecdotal.
Because I also want to point out that this randomized clinical trials and this evidence actually emerged not so long ago, in the beginning of 20th century, and observational and anecdotal evidence has been a part of human experience basically from the beginning of time. So roughly in about 50s, this kind of way of research occurred in response to the emergence of multiple single molecule synthetic agents. And over time, they became sort of gold standard. But what applies to the general group may not always apply to individual. And it takes away that, for example, doctor-patient relationship, the voice of the clinician, the voice of patient. So in that, sort of attempt to be as objective as possible, I think along the way we are losing something. And even though these legally prescribed drugs undergo robust clinical studies, they are not safe. They're still coming with a long list of adverse effects, even death when overdose. So they don't really guarantee safety. Absolutely. And what is evidence today could be negligence tomorrow. For example, thalidomide, which was prescribed for pregnant women for nausea, vomiting, and it was evidence-based drug. And what happens? So many, birth malformations as a result has happened.
Absolutely.
So this approach, although we need to have some kind of objective measures, I totally understand it, but we also need to ask questions that absence of evidence is not always evidence of absence.
I agree, and I just feel that this current system is too rigid and too heavily designed around this idea that therapeutic goods regulation is about pre-market approval of quality, safety, efficacy of synthetic single molecule drugs. That's all that we need to deal with. That is the scope of medicine regulation. Anything that sits outside of that, well, that's unapproved. And we'll have special annoying pathways that you have to jump through to get access to unapproved medicine. But this is, I know you can kind of, when looking at the history of therapeutic goods regulation in this country, you see how we have gotten to this point. But now we need to put the toothpaste back in the tube. We need to unscramble the egg. We need to actually go back to
unlearn.
We need to say what's the object here? Healthy society. What is the role of the medicines regulator? What are the incentives that are created by this current system, and what bad outcomes and practices do those incentives create? So anyway, I think it's time for us to have that conversation, but I know there will be various people who are very protective of the current system that wouldn't want any changes to the status quo, but I think more and more people are starting to appreciate that there is a role for medicinal cannabis. The TGA must be so confused about the sheer numbers of people that are actually accessing unapproved therapeutic goods. I mean, this was intended to be a pathway for unapproved therapeutics.
And
Well,
it
wow,
becomes like a mainstream.
it's mainstream, right? Like, so we need to, and they're actually now
Prescription and on PBS, but also what I think as a society, we need to find the balance. For example, we need to have regulation, we need to have system, because as I said before, we are not the society of enlightened beings. We also tend to have, sort of bad side to us, or our shadow part. So we need to have structure, we need to have discipline, we need to have rules. But at the same time, these rules and the structure shouldn't be so, how to say, constricting, but we can't even do anything. So there needs to be balance between structure, regulation, but at the same time allowing different way of thinking. I also believe that people should have the right to choose how they heal themselves.
Yeah.
That's our legal right, that I should be able to choose if I heal myself with a medicinal cannabis or conventional drug. But also there's another point here. Unfortunately, we live in a litigation-oriented society. So for doctors, let's say sometimes this decision might be difficult because there could be fear of litigation. For example, if the patient comes and they say, I don't want to use chemotherapy for my cancer, I only want to use medicinal cannabis. As a doctor, you will be very, very concerned about it, although the patient has the right to choose. First of all, you're not sure whether that approach would work completely, but also, the patient can turn against you as well. So litigation could be a bit of a, blocking part.
Yeah, absolutely. And and there is, I can appreciate the concerns that doctors have, and you don't want any engagement with insurances and all of those sorts of things. But I just think we need system reform that gives comfort to patients, doctors, and frankly creates less workload for the regulator, because I feel for them.
For doctors as well, because current medicine doctors are somehow, becomes a system of medical centers, 10, 15 doctors working together, 5 minutes consultation, in and out. I'm also concerned, I don't want to sound critical about cannabis clinics, but we hear some of them really have very quick turnaround, few minute consultations. Sometimes I believe medicine is issued based on a text message or email. So we really need to step out of that kind of 5-minute medicine.
No, absolutely. I feel like we could talk for a long time, Dr. Teresa. I really appreciate all of your insights, and we'll keep fighting the good fight, lobbying all of the efforts, because at least from your experienced vantage point, you see what medicine has become, in the same way that we're also looking at what I guess the framework for access has become, and that there needs to be a much better way of looking at people, not just when they need assistance in an acute context, but just living their best life, having a cold shower every morning, eating well, sleeping well. This is what we support.
Balance in our lives.
Absolutely. It does remain to be seen whether Mitch and I will get on board with the showers, but I'm putting a flag in the ground for us to have an explore of that.
You should definitely have a shower soon.
A cold one?
I'm showing general.
Just in general? Okay. Well, I guess if I'm going to have a shower, I might as well make it a cold one, just to see how we go.
Exactly. It's only just, explain.
No, that sounds great. Well, no, Dr. Teresa, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise.
Yeah, really, massive fans of your work, and we will look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming on.
All right. Okay. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, Andrew Dowling here, and Mitch Kurtz. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the AltMed podcast.
Make sure to hit like and subscribe, because we've got heaps more content coming out, and it's really fun and great, and we love it all.
Also very good.